This is Mikey Borup for PremiumBeat.com, and in this After Effects course, you will learn the basics to advanced features of After Effects: interface, shape layers, motion tracking, compositing, and more. During these tutorials, feel free to pause, rewind, and ask questions. I will be using After Effects CC version 12.2, but most of the techniques learned can be used in older versions. In this video, we will cover working with footage, color correction, speed changes, and noise reduction. So let's fire up After Effects and get started. Okay, so here I am in After Effects, and I've got a new composition open, and I've got lots of footage that I've brought in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over some typical situations and kind of show some things that you can do with footage. So with footage, we're going to be color correcting, we're going to be changing speed, we're going to be lowering noise, and so things like that. So let's just start here at the top. And what I have here is a clip of a ring kind of rotating. And as you can see, this is a hack job I did here. I didn't have a proper way of rotating this, and so this is just my phone here, and that's how I got this nice reflective surface. And we are rotating it on a spinning chair, and it worked wonders actually. But I don't like that I can see the rest of the stuff, so I want to be able to kind of manipulate this footage so that it's just all black. And first, when you're doing things in After Effects, this is the footage window. So I just double clicked on it and brought it up here in the footage window, and I'm going to go to where I want this to start, which is about right there, and I'm going to click this button here, and it sets my in point, and that sets my out point right there. And so when I do that, I can bring this down now in the timeline, and it only is going to get that part of the footage. So this is a 720p timeline. This is 1080p footage. Let's go to composition settings, and let's change this to 1920 by 1080. And now that fits in there just right. Now, if I want to mask this out, I'm going to use what is called the mask tool, and we've talked about this before. And so I grab the pen, and I'm going to just mask around the footage. And it's going to cut that out. My problem, though, is right here at the end. The footage is rotating, but the mask isn't. So let's come into the mask, keyframe the mask path, come here to the end, and let's move the mask so it fits it. And there's some other couple little things, like I see some dust here, so I can come in with the mask and maybe eliminate that dust. And you only need a couple of keyframes for something like this. And let's take a look. And that's pretty good. Now after this, I might want to scale this up a little bit. So I'm going to hit scale and bring this up. But instead of scaling like that, there's a new way of scaling if you're in a newer version of After Effects. If you're on Creative Cloud, you have this. We go to Effect, Distort, and then it's Detailed Preserving Upscale. And with this, it's an effect. I'm not scaling down here in the normal scale settings like this, but I'm scaling it up here in the Effect controller. And as I do that, it's going to make things nice. It's a better looking scale than if I were to use just the normal scale. So I'm going to come in here, maybe feather this mask a little bit. And this is looking pretty good. Now say it's not really rotating at the right spot. And so what I can do is, first, I don't like the way it's angled. It's angled a little funny. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to keyframe all of these positions, all of these transform properties, the position, the rotation. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be changing, but I want it to be a little bit straighter. So I'm going to keyframe that, and then I'm going to bring in my rulers, So Command R, and I'm going to mark where this is at. I'm going to come to the end, and I'm going to move it, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit this way. So now, as it goes through, it's going to look like a little bit better of a rotation because I didn't get a very good one. It's Command colon or Control colon, and it'll make those rulers hide. And so now as I render through this, that's looking pretty good. I like the way that looks. So let's add some color correction to this. So I'm going to Effect, Color Correction, and my preferred way to color correct is with curves. But take a look through some of the other effects. And so maybe let's brighten this up a little bit and then bring in a little bit more contrast. Make it nice and sparkly looking. Let's take a quick render through this. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's move on to the next piece of footage and see what we can do with this. Okay, so with this footage, it looks pretty good. I don't see a lot of noise. It doesn't need straightened or anything like that. But the only complaint I have is the colors are a little bit off. And everything seems just a little bit yellow. So I'm going to come into Effects, go down to Color Correction. Let's go to Curves. And basic color theory, if you want to make things less yellow, you add more blue. So I'm going to go to my blue channel, and I can add blue. And as I add blue, you can see it's starting to look a little bit more real of how it's supposed to look. And I can come up here and turn on and off to see the differences. I'm going to just kind of add a little bit of blue. Maybe after this I realize, okay, maybe there's a little bit of green to it. So I'm going to go to green, and I'm going to drop the green, add a little bit more magenta. And you can just kind of play with it a little bit to get the look you want. Now I can come into just the RGB, not a single channel, and it's going to affect everything as a whole. And I can maybe add a little bit more contrast, or we can add less contrast. So before, after. So just a little bit of color correction goes a long way, and this is a typical thing that you might be doing in After Effects with footage. It was just color correction. So now something else that I want to kind of bring your attention to is it's a little bit dark right here, but not so much here. And so how we would fix this is to do some selective color correction. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, so Command or Control D on your keyboard, and I'm going to come in, and on the top layer, let me just hide the bottom one. I'm going to take my pen tool, and I'm going to mask kind of down the side of her face. I'm going to hit F on the keyboard, and it'll bring up the feather in the mask. Or if I just twirl down here, I can see that in the mask. And I'm going to feather this. Let's turn on this back layer again. Now on this top layer, I can now color correct this separately from the back layer. And we can brighten this up. And now you can see I've brightened up that whole section right there. And that's another thing that you might be doing with After Effects, is just brighten up certain areas. And After Effects makes it really easy to do this when you're compositing things together. So as I render through this, this is looking pretty good. Let's go on to the next piece of footage. Now this next piece of footage is, I've shot at 60 frames a second, and so it'll play in high speed. So let's just find one spot we want to work with. Right here. So let's take the beginning of that. It's about right there. Grab the endpoint. Let's come back into our comp. Let's delete what we have done. And let's bring in the new piece of footage. As you can see, it's a smaller. It's set at 720p instead of 1080p. And also this piece of footage is too long. So let's bring this up to 20 seconds. This down to 1280 by 720. Let's take a look at this. So 20 seconds is too long. It looks like it goes 9 seconds. Go to composition settings. Okay. So now this is high speed footage, and right now it's looking normal. And when you're working with 60 frames a second, you want to change the speed. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the composition settings, and let's bring this to what speed we want to bring it to, which is 24. And if we want to slow this down so it's 1 for 1, then there's two things you can do. Let's go up to, let's make sure our layer is selected. We go to layer, and we go to time, and we can go to time stretch. And with time stretch, you have a stretch factor. So at a stretch factor of 100, that means it's not stretching. It's 100% of what it should be. And when you're going from 60 frames to 24 frames, you stretch things at a factor of 250%. So now it's going to be, each frame is going to be represented on each frame. And so we're not going to be doubling frames or anything like that. And I slowed this down to the perfect amount if I wanted to have 60 frames a second now into a 24 frame composition. So say right here, we wanted to slow it down even more. Well, then what we can do is let's come back into layer. Let's go to time, and let's enable time remapping. And I did that. And so at this point, what it does is it creates a new effect down in the timeline. And I can keyframe this. So right here, I'm going to hit a keyframe. And right there, I'm going to hit a keyframe. And so what I want to do is I want to stretch out this so it's a lot slower. And so the easiest way to do this is to put a keyframe. Say I've got a keyframe right here. This is where I want it to start slowing down. And right there. And if I just stretch this out, then it's going to slow it down. But you can see how everything looks a little jittery. That's because it's repeating frames. So if I go through one frame at a time, see how it's repeating the frame over and over again. I don't have frame blending turned on. So let's come back up here to layer. Let's go to frame blending, and let's turn it on to frame mix. And let's also right here make sure that we enable frame blending. Now as we go through, it's looking a little bit better, but you can see like right here, that edge, everything is kind of just blending together. There's another option. Let's go up to layer, frame blending, and it's called pixel motion. And what pixel motion does is After Effects will go in and decide, you know what? I think this is what it should look like, and it creates new pixels and tries to do a good job of mixing it together. But as you can see down here, there's some weird stuff going on. A little bit right there. So it's not always going to work great. But maybe it's just the amount of stretch I did on that. So we can also, let's take this and let's speed it up. And let's take a look at the graph editor. Now the graph editor is great for keyframes. And before I do that, I'm going to select all these keyframes. I'm going to right click on them, go down to Keyframe Assistant, and I'm going to hit Easy Ease. And it turns it into more of a curve. And so when I hit the graph editor right there, I can see a curve. And let's make this curve more pronounced. So as I play through, it's going to ramp up the speed really fast and then slow it right down. So I can kind of play around with the curve here. Let's take a look at this. Let's render this through so we can see it in full speed. So there's a speed ramp and a speed change, and you may need to do that all the time. Now, also in a shot like this, very similar to what we had in the other shot just before, where we've got some color correction that we need to kind of split. They had tinted windows, and it made the outside look really different. But it was only tinted windows on the side. So I can do the same thing. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to duplicate this. Let's grab the pen tool. And let's mask the top. And I'm going to need to keyframe this. So let's go into my mask settings, and I'm going to keyframe the mask path. So I come over here a few frames, keyframe that, a few frames, keyframe that. And then I'm going to go forward a few frames, and I'm just going to keyframe this. Gonna need to stretch this out a little bit. Okay, so we've got that, and you can see the mask is following along there. And then what I can do is I can come in, effect, color correction, curves, and I can fix this. Now everything looks a little bit too purple, so I need to add some green to it. Maybe brighten up the whole thing a little bit. Add some blue. And that's looking pretty similar. But what you do see is this hard edge. So what I want to do with that is I'm going to feather this edge quite a bit. And it's hardly even noticeable. So there's a second shot that we fixed right there. Let's go on to another one and delete these. Now, this last one I want to show you, it's a green screen, but I'm not going to key it out. We already did that. But what I want to show you in this video is that there's some noise. I actually had a hard time trying to find video with enough noise in order to show noise reduction. So I searched through all my video clips, and this is the best one I found in order to show some noise. So you can see a lot of noise right there in the green. So let's take this and let's do a noise reduction, so you can see how that works. So I've got this, clicked on the layer, let's go to Effect, Noise and Grain, Remove Grain. And it's going to put a little preview window here. Let's go and set that onto Final Output. Let's zoom in, and immediately you can see that things are starting to look better. That's with it, without. And it takes a long time to render this. The remove grain filter takes up a lot of processing power. So there it is without the filter on. Let's turn that back on. And there it is with. Now I don't have a whole lot of settings on this yet. So let's go into the noise reduction settings right there and reduce noise right there. It's at 1. We can bring this up. Let's crank this so you can kind of see what's going on. And you can see it's making his skin look all weird and the green back there look all really nice and smooth. I overdid it just so you can see what's going on, but it reduces the noise. You can come in afterwards and add some sharpness back into it. You can see that's kind of sharp again, but when I did that much noise reduction, it's still going to look a little bit funny. But that's that's so you can see what's going on. It's set on 3 passes. The more passes, the longer it's going to take to process. We've got different channel settings, and basically how it works: multi-channel, more passes. It's going to create a better noise reduction, but it's going to be a lot more processor intensive. But it's going to be a better look in the end. So that's noise reduction, working with footage. Let's do some other stuff just for fun, because we haven't had time to really explore many of these effects. So let's grab another one of this footage. And remember, this is the one that we color corrected earlier. But let's just look through some of these other effects that we can use with footage. So back with the noise and grain, we can add grain. So if we want this to be more of like a film look, we can add grain. So I've turned the preview mode to final output. And right here, let's add size. We can change the size of the grain. That's way too big. The intensity. We can come into the color, set it to monochromatic. Let's bring the intensity down. We can add a little bit of softness to it. And this is going to add some grain to it. That's always kind of a cool look. Another thing we can do is let's add a vignette to this. So the way I like to do vignettes is if I come up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. An adjustment layer is a good way of adding effects to everything below it. So whatever I add onto this adjustment layer will affect the layers below it. So for instance, I come up here and let's add a color correction. Let's go down to exposure. If I bring down the exposure, now this is on the adjustment layer, it's affecting the layer below it. So let's bring that down. And now what I want to do is I want to mask this adjustment layer. So I'm going to come up here to the marquee tool, and I'm going to bring it to an ellipse. Just double click and it creates a mask right in the middle of this adjustment layer. So now everything within the mask is going to be adjusted, everything outside of the mask is not. But what I want to do is down here in the masks, it says mask 1 add. Let's go to subtract. And now the edges are dark while the middle is not. And then if I come into the feather, I can feather the edges. And we have ourselves a quick and easy vignette. Let's do some other stuff. Let's come into this footage again. Let's go to Effect, Color Correction, Hue, Saturation. So I can come in and desaturate the footage a little bit. Maybe I want to go to Effect, Color Correction, and Levels. And let's increase the contrast. And let's go to Effect, Blur, and let's do a radial blur. And this is looking kind of weird right now, but let's go into Zoom, set the center to right there, and it's the mount down a little bit, but what we got is a little bit of an edge blur going on. So there's lots of stuff you can do to affect your footage and give it a unique look. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial. Make sure you jump into After Effects, go through the different effects you can do, bring in some footage, try the noise reduction, try changing the speed, do all of these things so you can get a handle for it on your own. Thank you for watching and participating in this course. Feel free to comment and share this video with others. In our next video, we'll be talking about particles, painting, and the puppet tool. Again, this is Mikey Bort for PremiumBeat.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.